Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Arcane Alienist. Glad you're here. I've got a topic today. I want to revisit an old topic that I've touched on, I think, in other places before on the metagame, not metagaming, but the metagame of D&D, which I've got we'll get to that segment at the end of the show. But first, I've got a call that's been kind of sitting, waiting for a response from Jason Hobbs. This is Jason's first call into the show. If you're not familiar with Hobbs, he has a Random Screed podcast. I think he used to have on Hobbs and Friends that he's not doing anymore. But if you are familiar with our friend Jason Connerly of the Nerds RP Variety Cast, he's referred to as the other Jason in the intro music to his podcast, because Hobbs was the original Jason back from the early days of the Anchor podcasting scene. So Jason Hobbs is the original Jason, and Jason Connerly is the other Jason. But anyway, this is the first time that Jason Hobbs has called into the show, so let's hear what he has to say.
Hey man, this is Jason Hobbs from Random Screed, and I found your show. I don't know how I lost it, but I was listening to your 3 R's of the OSR, and you seem to struggle a little bit about the revolution aspect of one of the definitions or one of the names of the 3 letters of the acronym. Well, in the very early days of the OSR, it truly was a revolution as it sprang up in response to the release of 3rd edition, which was a slap in the face to all the groggy grognarded neckbeards that were out there. And I say that with the most love. And they were like, no, we cannot play. This is not our D&D. So we have to figure out how to get the old D&D, the BX and the AD&D back in print. And we will do that by writing our own rules. And that's what Osric was. And that's, to them, it truly was a revolution.
Well, thank you for that call, Jason. I'm glad you finally called in. Yeah, I think that's a spot-on point there about when does the R in OSR stand for revolution. It, kind of did stand for revolution right from the beginning. The sort of desire to hold on to kind of the TSR era D&D after, we got a 3rd edition from Wizards of the Coast there, 2000 when it was released. Man, 23 years ago now. Hard to believe it's been that long. And I think, building off your point there, I think there's maybe a lot of people who think the OSR is newer than that. They don't realize it goes back to the early 2000s. They think it's been a rejection of either, if not 5th edition D&D over the last 10 years, maybe starting with 4th edition D&D. But no, it goes back to the early days of 3rd edition. Because I remember, coming across OSR stuff when 3.5 was still kind of the game of the day, and seeing stuff about that. And so a lot of those, critiques of that people particularly will point to with Matt Finch's primer on Old School Gaming, those are a lot of directly relate to really how 3rd edition D&D would handle stuff compared to, original D&D. So thanks again for that call, Jason. I appreciate it. And everybody make sure you check out Random Screed. It's good stuff. So I was going through some stuff I had written up and prepared back when I first decided to get into running BX, which very quickly turned into running Old School Essentials, which, really, same thing, right? But I wrote this when I was flipping through the old Mold Van Cook books, just contemplating how to sort of get a game going, and really thinking about the way you approach the game differently. I think we think a lot about the differences in old school gaming versus modern gaming being about the emphasis of resource management, procedural play. And by the way, with procedural play, you should go check out some of the videos that Daniel Norton has done on Bandit's Keep on his YouTube channel about procedural play. He's got a couple really good ones. I'll put a link in the show description for this episode. But I think that's what we think about. We discuss a lot. And here's some ideas I may have referenced, I think, at various times, either in my previous episodes or maybe on some old Cerebrivore ones. But it's trying to get people to think a little differently about how to play a character in BX or in Old School Essentials, or really in any, I think, probably first edition AD&D back. And particularly anything where you're getting XP for gold or XP for treasure. And one of the things I want to talk about, I guess, in this is the metagame of BX, is what I called this. And again, I may have referenced this at various places before, but I thought it's just on my mind and I noticed it, so I thought I'd revisit it for this episode. So we talk about metagaming. It has some different meanings in role-playing game discussions. And one thing, when we say someone is metagaming, we're generally talking about when a player uses information that the character they are portraying does not have to make decisions. Either, from, your medieval peasant who has run away from the landlord and is now living the life of adventure. He really doesn't understand Newtonian physics. There's no way he could have constructed that concept to solve that problem. That's one kind of metagaming. But more often, simply when a player, maybe particularly one who's been really familiar with the game, who maybe have run the games or has thumbed through the monster manual, knows the strengths and weaknesses of a monster as soon as they figure out what it is. And then the character would not know that, but the player is utilizing that knowledge to make decisions. You can even accuse the DM of metagaming sometimes if they're not careful. I mean, I've had discussions before about, is it possible for the DM to metagame? I think the DM can metagame in the negative sense when they listen to the players construct their plan of attack against a monster or a villain, and then they act as though the villain or the monster knows what they're doing when there's no way that the NPC would know what the players had come up with. Some DMs may be tempted to do that to sort of make sure the encounter remains challenging and a little more memorable, and the stakes remain high. But it is sort of unfair to say, this character wouldn't know that. Again, I refer you to some recent episodes of Hindsightless where Joe Richter talks about running the Wrath of the Righteous in Pathfinder, and actually encountering a villain that does have that information, that plausibly that's baked into what makes the villain a challenge, and is that it's an arch villain that has throughout the entire adventure path had their spies and their agents reporting back information on these adventurers that have becoming an increasing problem for him, right? So when they do come to encounter him, he does have some knowledge of their strengths, their weaknesses, their typical strategies, and things like that. Anyway, so that's what we tend to think of in metagaming, right? If you play any tabletop like skirmish games or war games, we'll talk about the meta game or the meta, which is more the way the game is played locally, local, I was going to say conventions, but that's probably confusing because I'm talking about a gaming convention. Local norms, local customs, or what's everybody getting into? What's the trend now? What's everybody focused on? What kind of strategies are the people who play in your area employing at the table, and how best to prepare for that and counter for that? And that can vary from place to place because you got different people approaching the game in different ways, right? How the game is played. But literally speaking, I think when you use the word metagame, that is simply your awareness that you're playing a game. And to understand the ultimate goal of the game is important. So when I talk about the metagame of D&D, it is to gain experience points and level up your character. That's the metagame. Now, we have fun along the way. We have adventures, some fun stories come out. It's more than that, right? But the game part of D&D, the essential goal, the metagame of D&D, and there may be other ways of defining it. This may not be the one single answer to this, but the way just bear with me for a minute. When I say the metagame of D&D is to gain experience point and level up your character. That's what drives the game forward. The metagame of football is to score touchdowns and field goals and prevent the other side from scoring more than you, right? The metagame of chess is to, make it through the series of exchanges long enough to get into checkmate and trap the other player's king, right? So every game has a metagame, right? It's the basic goal or objective of the game. And in D&D, the goal is to gain XP and level up your character. So in BX D&D and Old School D&D, Original D&D, First Edition AD&D, most of that experience is coming from treasure. A gold piece worth of treasure translates into 1 experience point. So as a result, the game rewards getting to the treasure without getting killed. Because if your character gets killed, they don't get any XP, right? It's all the total pool of XP based on the treasure you get is divided among the characters who survive the adventure, right? So the emphasis is not to defeat the foes and get XP for defeating the foe. It's to get the treasure. That's the metagame. And if you don't play the game with that in mind, you're going to fall flat. And we saw this early in my Mythic World of Erd campaign where people were going, why are we not leveling up? And I'm like, because you're not getting any treasure. You're going in and fighting monsters and you're investigating mysteries and looking at the plot, which is also part of the game. But you're not paying attention to the core engine that drives the game forward in terms of your characters leveling up and really then having the money to buy new gear and improve the trappings they do that also is part of sort of how you improve characters in Old School D&D. By getting better stuff, right? Hiring henchmen, things like that. You need the money to do that. They were kind of in the mindset of what we do more contemporary D&D of just following the plot, investigating, fighting bad guys, things like that. So in Old School D&D, monsters are still an essential part of the game, but defeating them is not the point of the game. It may be the motivation of a character. It may be what narratively drives things around, but for the game to go on and perpetuate itself forward over and over again across a campaign, defeating them is not the point of the game, at least the game part of it necessarily. The monsters and villains are just an obstacle to overcome to get the treasure. So, and particularly in BX and Old School D&D, monsters sometimes can be very deadly, particularly if the DM is not subscribed to the notion of balanced encounters. Defeating a monster to get its treasure might mean killing it, but it also might mean tricking it, outwitting it, subduing it, evading it, even negotiating with it maybe. Whatever the case is, the shift from looking at XP for defeating foes to XP for getting treasure changes the role that monsters and other hazards play in the game. It changes their reason for being there. And it changes the way players and player characters should approach dealing with them, if you're understanding how the game works. So what that means is player characters are, not just action heroes. They have to be explorers and treasure hunters. Now they can still and probably should be also action heroes because that's what makes things fun when you do daring things and memorable things, and that's part of the game as well. But what the game mechanic rewards is whatever strategy or approach results in recovering the most treasure, which can often be problem solving and clever play, not just kicking in the door and taking and attacking whatever jumps out at you, right? So it's important for the player to know that the metagame in old school Dungeons and Dragons or similar games is to gain XP and level up. Actually, I think that's important for the player to know in any version of D&D. But your character doesn't know that. So it's okay to metagame with you as the player in the back of your mind going, okay, what we're really trying to do here is get at whatever it is in this edition of D&D gets me the experience points, right? In Old School, we're talking about treasure. But your character doesn't know that. The challenge for Old School role-playing, or Old School D&D anyway, and in retro clones and things, anything that kind of is based off those sorts of older versions of the game, is to role play your character in a way that uses the abilities its abilities and its resources to serve the metagame, which is gaining treasure to get XP, while providing a narrative reason why the character engages in the adventure. So your character could actually just be looking for treasure and fortune. That's perfectly legitimate. But when you start getting things like character personality, character alignment, character motivations, and actually engaging and treating them like they're a person that lives in this world, there could be other reasons they're adventuring, right? It might be for personal gain, but it might be the personal gain is just a byproduct of they're on a quest for vengeance, or they're out to protect their homeland, or they're out to, maybe they are a hero, they're a knight, or they're cleric of who serves a noble deity, or whatever the reason is. They may have other narrative reasons to adventure just based on who the character is. But you've got to remember, as a player, that character is not going to get far unless they actually do things to gain treasure, right? They don't have to keep the treasure. They can take a vow of poverty and give it all away. But they have to get the treasure out of the dungeon and get it home to get their XP. How I might do this, let's say, you got somebody who's taking a vow of poverty. Maybe they're a cleric or a monk or something like that, who doesn't, their beliefs or their tenets don't allow them to obtain a lot of material wealth. Well, they give it to a charity. I mean, paladins used to have to do that back in the old day, right? That was part of the thing a paladin had to do. I think rangers as well, if I remember correctly. They're still getting XP for the treasure, but there's a reason their characters don't obtain the wealth, right? So that's just something to think about. That it's that balancing that, whatever the narrative reasons my character has to become an adventurer, and to be out and about doing these things, I still have to help the party recover loot, whether I keep a lot of that loot for myself or not, because that's what drives the thing. And the reason what happens when you just shift to following the narrative, and now, it doesn't matter whether you get any treasure or not. It's about surviving the adventure, defeating the foes, obtaining the milestone, right? Again, a valid way to play. I'm not criticizing it. Sometimes that's a lot of fun as well. But what it changes is people tend to look for the most expedient solutions. And if what the big rewards is defeating monsters and bad guys, that's where everybody starts rushing into combat, or at least the threat of combat, to maybe get somebody to surrender, so that you've actually defeated the monster or the villain by killing, subduing, or capturing them in some sort of hostile encounter, as opposed to all the other things that come up when it's like, I don't want to fight this dragon. He seems to be sleeping pretty hard. How much of this gold can we get out of there before we wake him up, and let's just go home, right? That's still a fun adventure, right? There's still the dragon becomes an environmental hazard, not an enemy necessarily. Anyway, those are just thoughts, approaching old school D&D, to remember that the metagame is to gain the treasure to get the XP so your character can advance and succeed and continue to have adventures. But it's okay to come up with a different motivation your character has in the world, to kind of overlay that onto, and you got to figure out just how to sort of play your character so that they willingly go along with efforts to gain treasure, even if treasure is not what motivates them, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on that. I'm about to start up a new campaign. I think we'll see how long it lasts, but I've played a couple times with my son and one of his friends recently, but he's got a larger group of kids. I found that the groups I've run in person over the last year or so have mostly been with with high school students. But this one, I'm looking forward to this, because we're going to move back into running. There's like 8, maybe as many as 10 of them that want to play, and you just can't do that with 5e D&D or with Pathfinder or anything like that. I think you need something like BX or OSC or something that assumes larger parties. And even if you don't have a large party, one of the first orders of business is to hire some hirelings and retainers to beef yourself up. Well, they may not need to do that if we really have that many of them playing, right? But we'll see if they stick with it, how many of them stick with it the long haul? You know, it may shrink down. But I'm looking forward to it and introducing D&D. I think my son and one other person are the only people, these kids that have played D&D before. So we're looking to have a good time. I'll give some play reports if as that comes together, assuming it does. But as I was kind of looking for how to teach the approach to BX D&D to this particular group, because they, even if they've not played D&D, they've obviously all played, you know, role-playing video games. And so it's not a completely foreign concept. I just wanted to remind them that sort of here's, you know, and these are all theater kids, so they're definitely going to love the role-playing aspect and getting into the role, I think. But reminding them in the background, you need to be focusing on the metagame of get some loot to get some XP so that your character, you know, advances and grows over time, right? All right. Well, I think I'm starting to talk in circles, so it's a good time to end this. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate everybody out there. Hope you're doing well. Take care of yourself. I'll be back with another episode in the future. And whatever you do today, make somebody happy. Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art is by Dave Bone. Be sure to check out his stuff at ironseer.com. You can leave me a message. I have my SpeakPipe account linked to the show description. You can also send me an email at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Just embed a voice memo, or I'll just read the text to your email during a future episode. Once again, thanks so much for listening.